We were 3 hours out from a fuel handoff in the dark sector, moving along a lane most ships had stopped trusting. The Bedford had taken a stone strike across the port flank 2 days earlier. Inside, that meant one pressure drop, one repair order, and a captain asking how soon she got her ship back. Outside, the cut ran 12 feet through the outer armour in a hooked line too neat to be honest. I was clipped to the hull on twin lines, with my boots locked down and my torch at my left hip. Tommy Beck was 10 feet above me, checking his tether the way he always did. Once because procedure said so, once because he still had enough youth left to believe mistakes could be bargained with if you caught them early. He was good, better than most men twice his age. He had also started finishing my work thoughts before I said them out loud, which was how I knew he was getting dangerous in the right way. "You still want the plate off whole?" he asked over suit comms. "If I can get it off whole, I can see what the strike did under it. It hit hard enough to curl that edge. Then score me a clean line." He put the cutter to work. The Bedford spread under us in armoured planes, sensor ridges, cargo blisters and service scars. I knew half her welds by eye, and the other half by the way my hands expected them to feel through gloves. My own glove found the lip of the damaged seam. Torn armour should have felt sharp, blistered, ugly. Instead it felt slick. I scraped with my probe and got back a spray of silver grains that skittered along the cut instead of drifting free. "Tommy," I said, "hold your cutter." He went still at once. "What did you get?" "Come down 2 feet and sweep your lamp across my line." His beam crossed the seam. Under that hard white light, the grains moved again. Smaller than rice dust and bright as fresh-cut silicon, they gathered where my earlier patch foam had seeped into the breach and arranged themselves in paired tracks along the armour. "Those bugs?" I popped a slag cup, dragged it through the moving silver, and snapped the lid down. The cup jumped once in my hand. Tommy dropped lower until our helmets nearly touched. "You want to pull back?" I should have said yes. "Seal the section. Lock it. Bring in materials and Captain Brooks and everybody whose job started where mine stopped." Instead, I looked at an open hull, a delayed burn, and the same lie every repairman tells himself when the work gets strange. One more cut and I'll know what I'm dealing with. "Score the plate," I said. "We expose the underlayer, patch what matters, and take the cup inside." Tommy did not argue. He put his cutter on the line and walked it along the hooked strike. I keyed my torch on the lower edge. Instead of breaking clean, the molten lip drew off sideways in hair-thin silver channels under the armour. I cut the torch, checked my feed, and got the same result. Something below the plate was pulling current. "Current draw," Tommy said, reading the same thing off his gauge. "Armour shouldn't carry like that." "It does today." I ran a test spike into the plate. My gauge chirped a spread I did not trust. The damaged section had gain. Armour is dead skin. You hit it, patch it, replace it, move on. This patch was acting like tuned hardware. "Bedford hull to control," I said. "Hold port correction burn until I say. I've got conductive behaviour across impact plate 7 port 12. Bring me Claire Maddox in materials." Control came back with a crackle. "Copy hold. Maddox is on her way to the bay. Captain wants a repair estimate." "Tell Captain Brooks I'll give her one when the hull stops acting smart." Tommy barked a laugh, then cut it short. "Nate." I followed his lamp. A line of silver grains had crossed my score marks and built a tiny forked pattern on bare armour. Paired lines, bridging nodes, feed path. I put my glove on the plate and felt a structured tap through the suit frame. 3 short bursts. Pause. 2. Pause. 3 again. Tommy heard my silence. "Tell me you got that." "I got it." "You want to hear the bad part?" "Go on." "I think it answered when you touched it." I cut the last seam and levered the plate out. Behind it sat a shallow chamber between armour layers, every surface bright with silver growth. The grains had eaten foam, epoxy and trace metals from the underlayer, leaving conductive threads in ordered runs. It looked built rather than broken. I sealed the plate in a sample sack and fixed a temporary patch over the hole with quick foam, and a clamp brace. The foam hissed into place. Beneath it, through gloves and frame and hull, I felt that same answer again. 3. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. Inside the airlock, when we finally got our outer gloves stripped and our helmets off, Claire was already waiting in materials with trays set under glass. Claire Maddox had the kind of face that sharpened when the news got worse. Most people softened or brightened or gave something away. Claire became more exact. "What did you bring me?" she asked. "Something eating my hull and drawing current through armor." She took the slag cup first. "You sound offended." "I am offended." Tommy set the sample sack on the bench. It moved. Claire glanced at him. "Everything moves somewhere. Not like this." She opened the cup inside a shield box, touched the grains with a ceramic probe, and watched them run toward the contact point in silver streams. "Get me your helmet record," she said. "You believe me already?" "I believe your sample wants geometry." She ran low power through the tray. The grains spread and joined into paired lines across the ceramic. Claire shifted frequency in small steps. At one setting, the lines changed shape and gathered at one corner of the tray, building a delicate mesh between two test contacts. Tommy leaned in. "What is that?" Claire enlarged the tray image on the wall. "At first pass, an amplifier stage. From bugs." She gave him one quick look. "Call them what you want: silicon body, conductive surface, responsive arrangement under field input. They are not random life eating your patch foam. They are manufacturing function." That changed the room. Damage could be repaired. Function meant intent, even if it was only the blind intent of a thing doing what it had evolved to do. "Out of my armor," I said. "Out of anything they can digest that supports conduction." She isolated one particle under magnification. Jointed hooks, needle legs, a hard, translucent shell. The thing opened a seam across its back and extruded a glossy filament that linked with two others nearby. Claire said, "Silicon dominant. Trace metals stolen from the plate. Some carbon where it helps flexibility. They are assembling structures to take and carry signal." "Can you kill them?" "I can learn one thing at a time." "The strike section has a pocket under the plate," I said. "We cut deeper now. You cut deeper without a map and you may open a path you can't close." "We already have a path." She ran current through the tray again. The silver lines rearranged into a tiny spiral and branching loops. Those shapes mattered. Even before she said it, I knew they mattered. Not because I understood them, but because they looked too close to something that belonged in flesh. Claire zoomed in. "I need to compare that against anatomy and sensor architectures." "Human?" "Possibly. Sensory, certainly." Tommy looked from her to me. "Then the hole outside is a room." Captain Brooks called us to briefing in person, which told me the matter had crossed out of routine damage. Brooks never wasted motion, and she never left her chair unless the problem had teeth. Claire kept the explanation short. Unknown silicon organisms, conductive structures, coordinated behavior, possible sensory geometry, risk to hull integrity and electrical systems. Brooks listened with her arms folded. She had a stillness to her that made most people confess faster than being yelled at. She looked at me. "Your recommendation?" "Reopen the section with full-cut gear, isolate the chamber and remove everything between the armor layers before it spreads." Claire answered before Brooks could. "Controlled cut only. We do not know how deep the structures run." Brooks shifted her eyes between us. "You two agree on anything?" "Yes," I said. "We agree it's bad." That got Tommy a snort. Brooks ignored it. "Security goes with you," she said. "Chief Price controls access. Maddox stays with the team. Hollis has field command until this leaves the hull. I want direct updates, not guesses." Jonah Price joined us at the lock with two security men in hard-shell suits and a compact rifle on his chest. He had the stance of a man who had spent enough years in bad corridors to stop wasting anger on the first bad surprise. I had worked alongside him often enough to know he took his people personally, and never said so out loud. "You sure this is your problem?" he asked me as we cycled out. "It was my problem before you got here. It became mine when it started acting smart." Claire came last through the lock with a sensor sled clipped to her belt like she resented every step between her lab bench and open space. Tommy gave her a hand over the threshold without comment. She took it without thanks. That was about as tender as either of them got in public. We cut back through the quick patch. The silver underlayer flashed at us under suit lamps. Claire guided the sled across the breach. "Field response across the whole chamber," she said, "denser toward center. Nate, your first plate removal exposed an outer shell over something larger." "Then let's meet it." The core cutter bit around the damaged section in a slow ring. We pulled the new plate free together. Behind it sat a cavity about the size of a coffin, curved to match the hull. What I saw froze me in place. Curled forms rose from the inner surface in pale silicon, delicate as shellwork, and laid out in repeating sets. Spiral cavities, thin membranes, loops and branching canals arranged around hard central stems. The chamber was full of them. Claire hit record at once. "Do not touch anything." "What is it?" Jonah asked. She stared at the nearest cluster. "Inner ears." Nobody said anything for a beat. Tommy broke first. "Human." "Yes." "How can you tell?" Claire moved the sled closer and highlighted one of the spirals. "Cochlea, semicircular canals, vestibular sacs, crude in texture, accurate in geometry." Jonah shifted his rifle. "Why would bugs make ears in our hull?" Claire kept staring into the chamber. "Because hearing and balance translate vibration into signal. If you want to read a body, steer a body, or use a body as part of a circuit, you start where the body tells itself where it is." That was the moment the thing changed shape in my mind. It was an interface. The sensor sled chirped a warning. A current path lit under the chamber floor, running away from us toward the maintenance spine inside the hull. "It already has a bridge inward," Claire said. "Can you map it?" I asked. "Not from here." Jonah pointed toward a dark spot in the rear of the cavity. "What's that?" I brought my lamp across. In the back wall, hidden behind one cluster of silicon ears, a tool line from our earlier foam patch had gone through into the cavity. The braided line twitched. Tommy reached for it. I caught his wrist. "Easy!" The line twitched again, then jerked hard enough to bang against the chamber wall. Ross Mace, one of Jonah's guards, said, "My auxiliary line just went dead." "Check it," Jonah said. Mace moved in, planted one boot at the breach, and leaned toward the back of the cavity. Beside him, Alan Keane locked on with his rifle angled down. Mace got 2 fingers on the trapped line and pulled. It came free with a spray of silver dust and something else behind it, a fan of glossy threads that snapped onto his glove and climbed his forearm in an instant. "Cut it!" I lunged toward him. Mace slashed at his own wrist with a line knife. The threads split and multiplied. One strand whipped across his helmet neckring. Another found the seam at his right ear seal. Mace hit the chamber wall with one hand, trying to crush whatever was on him. Keane grabbed for his shoulder. The threads hit Keane too. He fired by reflex. The shot punched past my helmet and sparked off armor behind me. Jonah slammed him sideways. Tommy kicked Mace in the chest and tore him off the breach. For 1 second, both guards fought it. Then Mace went still. He pulled a conductive pin from his belt pack and started placing it along the cut edge of the breach. Keane dropped to one knee and fed him tools. Jonah stared at them. "Ross." Mace did not answer. He set another pin, checked spacing, reached for a cutter, and widened the breach by 3 inches with care that would have made me praise him on any other day. Jonah stepped forward. "Ross, stand down." Keane raised the rifle toward Jonah. The muzzle tracked smooth and exact. I grabbed Claire by the shoulder ring and hauled her behind a brace just as Keane fired. The round tore past my helmet. Jonah put 2 shots into Keane's chest. Keane folded backward and pushed himself back up with the rifle still in hand. "Get him down!" Jonah drove forward. We swarmed him. Tommy hit the weapon. I put my shoulder into Keane's torso. Jonah drove a shock prong behind Keen's jaw. None of it worked like it should have. Keen moved through the blows with the same task-bound focus Mace had shown. Mace reached for my cutter. I caught his wrist and saw what had happened under his seal when my lamp crossed his faceplate. Fine silver filaments ran from his ear port behind the jawline and down the side of his neck under the suit liner. His eyes moved. He was still in there somewhere. That made what came next worse. He drove his forehead into my visor. The suit rang. I shoved him off, drew my torch, and burned across the joint of his right elbow. The arm failed. He did not cry out. He only turned his other hand toward the breach and kept trying to place the next conductive pin. Back! I pushed away from the chamber. Back from the chamber! Jonah put Keen down with a cutting charge on the helmet ring. I do not know if the man was still aware when his suit opened to vacuum. His body jerked twice and skidded away on the tether. Mace took 2 more steps toward the breach before Jonah fired through his visor. The chamber stayed open in front of us, full of pale inner ears and silver threads working in the cut we had made. Claire crawled back to the sled, eyes fixed on the rear of the cavity. "The bridge is deeper now," she said. "They used our access line." Tommy looked at Mace's body, then at me. He was setting a new circuit. I looked too. The conductive pins lay in a clean series along the cut edge of the hull, spaced for gain, aligned with the silver growth inside the cavity. Mace had been helping it finish the breach. Jonah keyed shipwide alarm. "Security emergency. Seal deck access around port maintenance spine 7. Full lockdown." Control answered at once, then cut out in static. Claire sent one of the sensor traces to my wrist display. "Current path goes through the spine and into the sensor trunk." "How far?" "Far enough." Jonah dragged Mace's body clear with one arm. "We need this hole closed now." "Close it, and you bury the structure in place," Claire said. "Leave it open, and it keeps using our wiring." Tommy pointed toward the chamber. "Something's moving in the back." He was right. Beyond the field of silicon ear forms, deeper between the plates, a denser knot of silver had begun to rearrange around the tool line hole we had opened. It was making room, making a passage. Brooks came over comms, sharp and direct. "Report," I answered before anyone else could. Infestation made contact with 2 crew through suit seals, both compromised. 1 down, 1 disabled. Structure inside armor includes human vestibular forms and a conductive path into maintenance spine. Brooks took half a second. "Can you cut it out?" "Not clean." "Can you stop it reaching internal systems?" Claire cut in. "Only if we deny the spine." Brooks asked the next question in a voice I knew too well. "What is the cost?" Jonah answered. "Anyone still in the spine dies if you vent it." 3 crew were in that branch on cable service, not counting the 2 guards. 1 might make an airlock if he ran fast enough. 2 would not. Tommy looked at me through his visor. He was waiting for me to give him another option. I wanted one too. Before I could answer, the cut edge of the breach rang under my hand. 1 tap, pause. 2, pause. 3. The pattern had changed. Then the maintenance hatch inside the hull opened on its own. We went in hard and ugly. The port maintenance spine was a narrow service lane between armor, coolant runs, conduit racks and ladder wells dropping toward the sensor decks. It was a bad place to lose control of a ship and a worse place to lose control of your own body. Warning strips flashed red over our helmets as internal lockdown rolled through the Bedford. The hatch behind us shut, then opened again when Jonah overrode it from his cuff. Ahead, somewhere below, a man cried out once and cut off in the middle. We found the first cable tech at a ladder junction, face down, 1 glove still clipped to a maintenance rung. Silver threads came out of his right ear and disappeared into the wall panel he had been working on. The bus bars inside wore a skin of glittering growth. Claire crouched by the panel. "They're bridging through low-voltage control paths. That's why the hatch obeyed. If they reach the sensor trunk, they can use the array as a carrier." Jonah keyed bulkheads closed in sequence below us. "I'm locking every door on this branch." A reply came from the door system in a clean female voice. Manual override accepted. Jonah frowned. I didn't send that. The hatch below us slid open. Ross Mace stepped through it. He should have been dead outside on the hull. What came through the hatch wore Ross's suit and Ross's frame, but his face was hidden behind a spare helmet taped onto a broken neck ring. One arm hung wrong where I had burned through the elbow. The other carried conductive pins and a drill. Ross, Jonah said, and the damage in the name told me exactly how long they'd served together. Mace did not speak. He set the drill to the wall and started boring mounting holes into the conduit rack. 2 more crew came behind him, both with silver threads at their ear seals. Tommy fired first. Jonah followed. Neither man stopped until damage and pressure loss took them away from the work. Mace kept drilling. I went at him with the torch. He blocked with the drill body, drove his shoulder into me, and shoved me against the ladder cage. He had been strong before. With whatever rode him now, strength came out in straight lines with no fear of broken fingers or torn muscle. He forced my torch hand down toward my own thigh. Tommy hit him from behind. The drill skipped. I drove the torch across Mace's chest rig and through the tool bundle he carried. Copper ran molten down the wall. Mace tried to grab the flowing metal as if it still mattered where the line landed. That detail stayed with me. He did not care about his body. He cared where the work went. Jonah planted a shock charge on Mace's spine and fired it. Mace folded. Jonah followed with 2 rounds through the helmet. This time the body stayed down long enough for us to move. Claire had gone drawn and hard, the way a face looks when theory turns into a death count. They're routing through people. Hearing, balance, skin conduction. The ear forms in the chamber are not study pieces. They're couplers. Talk plain, I said. They can drive human motion if they get a path near the vestibular nerve and enough conductive support. They don't need your mind. They need task access, hands, orientation, repetitive action. Jonah looked down the open hatch. Then we stopped giving them bodies. That part's already happening, I said. The second cable tech called from farther down the spine. He sounded out of breath, terrified, still himself. I'm at junction 6. Door won't shut. Something in the wall is moving. Stay where you are, Jonah said. I can hear it through the rail. I took 1 step toward the ladder and felt it too through glove and boot locks. A structured vibration running in the wall, following conduit, pausing at each branch, choosing. We moved down fast. Twice the doors accepted commands Jonah had not entered. A tool locker opened and spilled conductive cable into the lane ahead of us, like the ship was making parts available. At junction 6, we found the cable tech halfway inside a wall panel because he had crawled into it on his own. Fine silver whiskers ran out of both ears and across his cheeks. His eyes tracked us. His hands kept working inside the panel. Get away from him, Claire said. He looked at me when I said his name. Nate. The voice was his, tired, scared, still there. Back out, I told him. Slow. I'm trying. His hands kept moving inside the panel, twisting stripped wires into a bundle and feeding them along a silver mesh that had grown around the bus housing. He whined once and slammed his forehead against the open metal edge hard enough to split the skin above his brow. Tommy moved toward him. I caught Tommy by the harness. No, he's still in there, which means he can hear you while his arms do that. The tech said, please. Jonah's eyes met mine. Behind the visor, I saw the question he did not want to ask. Claire answered it for us. You vent the spine, she said. Now. Tommy stared at her. There are people down here. There is a bridge down here, Claire said. Her voice stayed level. That made it worse. If it reaches the array, the hull becomes a carrier. If the hull becomes a carrier, whatever built this gets a clean path through our systems and our bodies. You don't know that. I know enough. I called Brooks. My mouth worked around the words like they belonged to somebody else. Captain, port maintenance spine 7 is compromised. We have body control, conductive spread through command paths, and active progress towards sensors. Recommendation is hard vent and isolation. Brooks said, "How many crew remain in the section?" 3 confirmed. Maybe 4 if someone missed check-in. The silence on the line felt worse than any shouted order. Brooks did not stall because she was weak. Brooks stalled because once she made a choice, she carried it to the end. "Authorize," she said at last. "All hands clear if you can clear them. Hollis, Price, Maddox, Beck out in 30 seconds. Tommy turned on me. "Nate." I grabbed his suit ring and shoved him toward the upper hatch. "Move." The cable tech in the panel was crying now, while one hand kept weaving wire into the growing silver mesh. Jonah keyed general warning through the section. "Spine 7 vent in 20 seconds. Run." We ran. Claire dragged the sensor sled until it snagged on a rung and tore loose. Jonah went last. We reached the upper bulkhead and piled through. Jonah slapped the seal. The hatch started to close. Then a hand jammed into the gap from inside. I knew the glove. Tommy did too. Ross Mace's arm had no business moving after what we had done to him. The glove clawed at the hatch edge, then another arm joined it, and a face came up under the narrowing gap. The cable tech from Junction 6 dragged himself upward with silver threads braided across his cheeks and neck, using Ross's dead body under him as a brace. Tommy lunged for the opening. I threw him down against the deck and brought the emergency lever across with both arms. The hatch slammed. Mace's glove stayed caught for half a second before the pressure lock cut through the wrist. Vacuum took the section. Even through the sealed bulkhead, I felt the ship take the draw. Air ripped out of the spine, carrying loose tools, bodies, cable, blood, and a storm of silver grains with it. The deck under me shuddered once, then settled. Tommy rolled away from me and hit the wall with both fists. He was there. He was right there. I know. You shut it on him. I know. He got to his feet and came at me again, not to fight, just to put the blame somewhere he could touch. Jonah caught him by the chest pack and held him in place. "Enough," Jonah said. Tommy tore free and pushed off down the corridor. Claire stared at the sealed hatch. "Check the exterior." Brooks met us in the nearest ops alcove. Nobody spoke while the outside feed came up. At first, venting looked like it had worked. The open spine puked rubble into black. Bodies spun on broken lines. Silver particles sprayed out after them. Then the cloud slowed. I leaned closer to the screen. The particles were not drifting away. They were linking in the cold. Each grain locked to the next across scattered rubble and the cut edges of the vented spine. On the hull around the opening, growth spread outward along bolt lines and seam channels faster than I had seen it move in warm compartments. Claire went still in the way she did when fear had to pass through thought before it reached her face. "Cold favors them." Brooks looked at her, meaning. "Vacuum is their preferred state. The vent froze them into a crystal network. Their conduction improves in the cold." Tommy had followed us in without my noticing. He stared at the screen and wiped his face with the heel of one glove. We fed it the whole spine. That was the moment the Bedford stopped being damaged and started becoming something else. Silver growth spread across the outer hull in branching bands, following seams, antenna roots and sensor veins. It moved with ugly order. Brooks said, "Options." Claire answered first. "Track current paths. Find where the bridge enters the sensor trunk. Cut it before hull and array synchronize." Brooks looked at me. "Can you get a team there?" "I can get there," I said. "Get your team and move." Tommy said, "I'm coming." I started to refuse. Then I saw his face and kept my mouth shut. Better near me than angry and alone somewhere the ship could use him. The sensor trunk ran behind observation platforms above the midship array, where external pickups and guidance vanes met the interior processors. If the infestation reached that trunk, the whole ship could become one long-tuned instrument. The Bedford was already starting to act wrong on the way there. A hatch ahead of us slid open before Jonah touched the control. Every rail and bulkhead returned a faint, structured answer through my gloves. Reflex, recognition. We passed an exterior monitor and saw one of the port sensor vanes swing a degree toward the dark sector on its own. "Did Command slew that?" I asked. Claire checked her pad. "No." Then the next vane moved. Lights came on before we reached them. Doors shut after we passed. The skin of the ship was collecting sensation and sending it inward. At trunk access, Claire pried open a service panel and swore once under her breath. Inside, the normal cable bundles lay wrapped in silver mesh that spread from a fist-thick growth crossing from hull anchor points into the sensor lines. "That's the bridge," she said. "Hull to array." It looked disturbingly like nerve structure grown around metal instead of flesh. "What happens if I burn it?" I asked. "You may blind the ship. You may also trigger every tuned surface on the hull at once." Brooks came over comms. "We just picked a passive return from deep sector bearing port ahead." "How far?" "Too far for visual. Close enough for concern." Claire said, "Put it on local." The return showed as a weak structured source far out beyond our route, then another beside it, then three more, too weak to classify. Still, they were turning. Even on partial data, I could see that much. Tommy leaned close to the display. "Are those ships?" Claire did not answer. She widened the service panel and found a hidden cavity behind the bridge, tucked between a structural brace and the sensor baseplate. Inside sat a silicon object no larger than a loaf pan. At first I thought it was another cluster of ear forms. Then I saw the proportions. It was the Bedford. A tiny replica of our ship, grown in pale silicon and silver threads, all decks and vanes and cargo blisters represented in miniature. One section on the model glowed with denser growth, sensor and communications. Tommy whispered, "It made a map." Claire kept her hands off it. "A staging model." That was worse. She scanned the cavity again. "Bridge into sensor lines first, then local model, then conversion target." Brooks came over comms, sharper now. "Talk to me," Claire answered. "It is not merely spreading. It is planning the ship as a signal body. The marked deck next is sensor and communications." I looked at the distant returns turning slowly in black. "It's calling something." Claire nodded once. "Or answering something. The difference does not help us." Brooks said, "Move." Sensor and communications sat behind a pair of pressure doors above midship array support. 3 crew were already down in the corridor outside when we arrived. Threads ran from their ear seals into cabinet gaps. The deck doors stood open. Inside, the place I had known for 10 years as a clutter of operator pits, screen towers and cable nests had become a half-grown organ. Silver filaments crossed between consoles and handholds. Some had the clean geometry of circuits, some curled with the same anatomical logic as the ear forms under the hull. The two met around the central array processors. Jonah put a hand up for stop. Ross Mace stood on the far side of the room. He wore a different suit now, stripped of markings, visor gone, head exposed to deck air. The gash in his face should have killed him twice over. Silver filled it. Threads crossed the broken cheek and ran into his ear canal and down his neck. He was fastening a conductive rail from the processor housing to the deck plates. Beside him worked 4 more crew, including the midship electrician Jonah had shot earlier. Bandaged leg, blank focus, tool belts open, good, careful work. "Jesus," Jonah said, and there was grief in it this time, not fear. Claire scanned the room with her handheld. "The receive path is here, human tissue in the loop. They need bodies to phase lock the signal." "Plain," I said. "The ear replicas were test pieces. This deck is the full version. The altered crew are active components." Brooks came over comms. "Contacts just sharpened. Multiple objects changing course toward our sector." Tommy said, "They heard us." "No," Claire said. "They heard the early stages. Once this completes, they get a cleaner call." One of the operators near the central pit turned toward us. I knew him. Ben Ortega, quiet man, good with dish alignment. Silver threads ran under the skin at his temple. He opened his mouth and a burst of sound came out that froze me where I stood. It came from the deck speakers and the bodies at once, a structured tone stacked in bands that hit the inner ear like a twist from inside. My balance broke. Tommy slammed into a cabinet. Jonah dropped to one knee. Claire clutched the doorframe and shut one eye, trying to hold orientation by vision alone. "Get low," she said. "They're driving vestibular response." Mace came across the deck with a cutter bar in one hand. The fight that followed never felt like battle. It felt like repair work gone rabid. Jonah fired around the doorway while I crawled left behind a line of consoles. Tommy got to the overhead feed and cut it, but the silver growth on the cabinets carried current anyway, and the whole deck lit itself under the consoles. Mace used that light to track us and kept coming. Claire reached a side panel and started tearing communication buses free by hand. "I need the bridge route." "Where?" "Under the central pit." I had to cross open floor to get there. Every time the deck tones shifted, my body leaned where it should not have leaned. Feet slid, hands reached wrong. On that deck, my own body turned traitor by inches. Tommy beat me to the central pit. He dropped beside the processor housing and drove a pry bar into the floor grill. Mace changed direction immediately and went for him. "Tommy, move!" Tommy looked up, confused for a second, then turned his head toward the processor stack, as if somebody had called him from that direction. His pry bar hand stayed where it was. His free hand reached toward a silver filament hanging from the cabinet edge. "Tommy!" He jerked like a man waking. "I'm good." He was not good. The deck tone shifted again, a layered thrum that touched teeth and skull fluid. Tommy stumbled, then stood and started walking toward the array with the pry bar held across his chest. I went after him. Mace cut me off. I took the blow on my torch housing, jammed the hot tip into his shoulder, and shoved past. Tommy had reached the open processor base. Silver threads from the cabinet edges had found the back of his neck seal where the collar sat loose from our run through the spine. He was smiling. I grabbed him and hauled him backward. He fought me at once, intent on turning back to the work. The pry bar came up and almost cracked my visor. I caught his wrist and saw the threads at his neck, thin as hair. "Tommy," I said into his face, "look at me." His eyes found mine for 1 second. "Nate? Stay with me. I'm trying." He started to cry. His hands kept pushing the pry bar toward the processor pit. Mace reached us. Jonah put 3 shots through Mace's side and 1 through his throat. Mace hit the deck, rolled, found a dropped cable clamp, and used his last movement to fasten the clamp onto the silver rail he had been carrying. Even dying, he kept working. Claire yelled from under the console bank. "I found the bridge!" She had the route exposed, a dense cord of silver growth and stolen metal running up from the hull anchor into the array frame. She drove a ceramic wedge under it. Sparks showered out in white arcs. The room answered. Every silver line on the deck brightened. Operator chairs skidded toward the central pit. One of the altered crew slammed his own head into a switch bank until the panel broke open, then fed both hands into the gap to join 2 exposed contacts. Tommy turned in my grip and bit at the seal joint under my helmet ring. I hit him once in the face, hard enough to make him blink and come back. "Don't let me finish it," he said. Those words did more damage than the bite. I had trained him, brought him out on hull walks, watched him learn the Bedford skin well enough to stop asking permission for every cut. He knew the code to my locker and the cup I favoured in the galley, and exactly how I liked a weld seam cleaned before inspection. "Claire," I said, "how far gone?" She looked once, and I hated her for telling the truth. "Enough." Tommy heard that too. "Nate." The deck tone shifted again. His pupils widened, his arms tightened around the pry bar. The silver threads at his neck crawled over the collar seam and into the suit liner. "Nate, please. There are jobs nobody teaches. They only wait until your name gets called." I pressed the torch tip into the bundle of threads at Tommy's neck and drove the heat through collar, liner, flesh, and the silver running under it. He arched once in my arms, jaw open against the inside of his visor, then went loose. I laid him down with the pry bar still trapped under one hand. Jonah covered us while Claire severed the bridge root with the ceramic wedge and a shaped charge from security stock. The cut blew half the processor frame apart. Consoles died across the deck. The layered tone cut off. For one breath, I thought we had it. Then emergency power buses came alive under the floor. Claire saw it first. Fallback path, hull draw through weld buses. Brooks came over comms with no room left in her voice for anything but command. All hands abandon ship prep. Launch crews to boats 1 through 4. Hollis, Maddox, Price, report whether the beacon can still be stopped. Claire looked at the dead deck, the bridge root, the silver rails, Tommy on the floor, Mace still twitching around his last clamp. From inside? She asked. No. Brooks did not ask what that meant. Then tell me what remains. I looked at the processor pit and understood it before Claire spoke. The hull had too much structure already, too much gain, too much tuned surface spread across too much ship. You can still aim it, I said. Claire turned to me. Maybe. Maybe is enough. We got Tommy out of that room. I carried his upper half. Jonah took the legs. Claire walked ahead of us without looking back once. On the way to the outer prep station, alarms rolled through the Bedford and escape crews flooded side corridors carrying emergency packs, med cases, and whatever pieces of their lives had been close at hand when the order came down. I saw Brooks at one crossing, standing in the middle of that human current and cutting it into order with nothing but her voice. That was the last time I saw her in the passageways. She met us again in the prep bay by the port airlock. Outside the armoured viewport, the Bedford's hull glowed with silver pathways running toward the sensor mast like rivers finding lower ground. I set Tommy down on an equipment pallet and kept my glove on his shoulder ring longer than I should have. His helmet still held the faint scuff from where he had clipped a junction brace last month, and laughed about it for 2 days afterward, because I had finally missed one too. Brooks said, "Tell me." Claire laid out the only plan left. The beacon had already built itself through the ship's skin. We could not break the whole path from inside before the distant contacts got a usable signal. But the outer geometry still mattered. If the seam runs near the sensor mast were cut and re-welded in a new shape, Brooks could dump reactor reserve through the skin in one final surge. The burn would rip the Bedford apart. It would also send the last strong carrier away from settled roots and into deep dark. Brooks listened with her hands folded behind her back. "You're asking me to kill the ship," Claire answered. "The ship is already becoming something else." Brooks looked at me. "Can you make the external changes?" "Yes." "Can anyone else?" "No." Hull work like that under pressure takes a hand that knows where every seam wants to move when it heats and cools. I knew the Bedford's skin by touch and memory. Claire said, "There is one more problem. The receive path is tuned for human vestibular systems. Once Nate is outside near final alignment, the signal may steer him through suit conduction and inner ear response." Brooks understood at once. "You're saying the beacon can use his body the way it used the others?" "Yes." I stared out at the hull and felt old, in a way I had not felt an hour earlier. "Then I break the part it needs." Brooks turned from the viewport. "No." Claire did not say no. She only asked, "Are you sure? You have a cleaner idea?" There was none. If the signal path relied on hearing and balance, then I had to take balance away before I stepped onto the hull. I sat on the prep bench. Claire set 2 emergency acoustic calibrators on the deck between my boots, along with seal gel and pressure injectors. Jonah stood by the door like a man standing watch at an execution. Brooks left to launch the boats. Claire knelt in front of me and checked my helmet seals. "You can still refuse," she said. "No. This will leave damage even if you come back in." "I know." She let the thought show plain on her face. She did not expect me to come back in. "We overload the ear cups," she said. "Seal gel first to protect against rupture into open channels, then pressure surge and counterphase. It will wreck the vestibular response. Hearing, too. You're still trying to sound kind. I'm trying to sound exact. Good. I looked once at Tommy on the pallet, once at the hull beyond the viewport, and nodded. Claire did it fast. The gel went cold in the ear cups. The first acoustic spike hit like a steel rod driven through both sides of my skull. The second came with the pressure surge. The world tilted, rolled, and broke. I pitched off the bench and hit the deck on my shoulder. Fluid rushed through my head in the wrong direction. My body tried to find upright and found nothing. Somewhere above me, already muffled, Claire was saying my name. I pushed up on both palms, vomited into the deck drain, wiped my mouth, and told her to do the other side if she had not already. She had. That was the funny part. There had only been one sequence. My sense of order had gone with the rest. After that, I had to work by sight, by touch, and by tether tension. Jonah helped me into the suit. I hated that more than the pain. Outside the airlock, the Bedford had changed from ship to instrument. Silver growth crossed the hull in tuned bands, feeding the port sensor mast and the vanes around it. The work lay along 3 exterior seam runs and 1 junction box above the mast root. I clipped on, cycled through, and stepped into black. The hull moved under me, though I knew it did not. My boots searched for purchase a fraction late each time. I trusted the maglocks and the tether drag, and kept my eyes on the seam ahead. My torch hung on my right. On my left I carried a cutter bar, ceramic wedges and a field welder pack boosted well past safe output. Brooks came over comms, thin and distant through the damage in my ears. Boats 1 through 4 launched. We are pulling survivors now. We hold position as long as we can. You hold until I say burn, then you cut loose. A pause. Understood. The first seam cut went clean. I opened the silver run and saw the growth inside split and rejoin around my torch path. It wanted continuity more than it feared damage. That helped. Claire talked me through alignment from inside, reading sensor feedback while I worked. Numbers meant nothing to me in that moment. I followed her by shapes and landmarks and the memory of a ship I had spent half my life patching back together. 2 feet starboard, she said. Now down to the vane route. The hull tapped through my gloves. The pattern had changed again. I cut the second seam. A shape moved ahead of me near the mast brace. Jonah Price came over the curve of the hull on a safety line. He wore no helmet. That should have been enough to tell me what I was seeing, but the mind clings to the familiar face, even when the facts have already put a knife in it. Silver ran across Jonah's scalp and down into the open collar of his suit. His eyes found me. His mouth opened and closed once before sound reached me over suit radio. You left work unfinished, he said. Somebody else was using Jonah's voice. He pushed off the brace with a cutter hook in one hand and came straight for me. On a hull with my balance ruined, speed belonged to the man who still had an inner ear. He hit me chest to chest and drove us both sideways along the armor. My tether snapped tight and saved me from drifting free. I jammed the torch between us and fired short. The heat clipped his left side and charred the suit fabric. He barely noticed. One hand went for my neck ring. The other tried to drag my torch arm away from the seam work. Jonah had spent years in boarding drills. I had spent years attached to hull plates with tools in both hands. Men fight where they learned. I let my knees go, dropped under his center and kicked my boot lock release at the same instant. He had anchored hard for the shove. I had not. My body swung under his, dragging him off stance. I caught the mast brace with one glove, swung the torch up under his rib line, and burned across the side buckle of his harness. The strap parted. His body rolled away from mine on the tether. He still came back. One hand over hand, pull at a time, face ruined by effort and silver threads, trying to reach the seam I had opened. Then I saw what he was after. The cut. If he could bridge it again, the alignment held. I kicked off the hull, caught his tether above the waist ring, wrapped it once around the mast brace, and cut the free segment with the torch. The brace caught the line and jerked him sideways into an energized plate where silver growth fed the vein route. Current took him through every thread in his body. He hit the hull once and stayed there, held by his own climbing hooks. I wanted to say something over the radio. His name, maybe, an apology, but I had work open and time already spent. I went back to the seam. The third cut needed a reverse pull and a hot closure. My hands knew it even with the rest of me lagging half a step behind. I re-welded across the new path, forcing the silver runs into the geometry Claire had plotted. Then I climbed to the junction box above the mast route, opened the cover and found the last active bridge feeding the array in a fat silver cord wrapped around the bus bars. Claire, I see it. Once I cut this, how long? Less than a minute before the structure self-corrects. Good enough. Brooks broke in. Last boat clear. Nate, we are ready for your mark. I looked back once. The lifeboats hung off the Bedford, small against the ship that had carried all of us. Somewhere inside, Tommy still lay in the prep bay. Somewhere farther in, the galley table where he used to steal my coffee packet sat bolted to a deck that would not last another minute. I pulled myself to the airlock frame and keyed the outer manual lock. Brooks heard the click through telemetry. Nate, if anything survives this on the hull, it stays out here. We can still cycle you in after the burn. No. I looked at the silver flooding the panel around my glove. You know better. Silence, then Brooks said, I do. That was her version of goodbye. I drove the cutter through the final bridge. The hull lit under me from bow to stern, every silver path answering at once. The ship carried one last signal into black, stronger than anything before it, aimed where I had bent it. Now, I said. Brooks dumped reactor reserve through the skin. I have welded most of my life. What happened to the Bedford in that last minute was ship death told in a language I had spoken since apprenticeship. The outer growth went white and glassy first. Conductive bands fused across the armor and burst apart in bright sprays. Sensor vanes flashed, sagged and tore free. The mast under my boots shook itself to pieces. Farther down the hull, whole seam lines opened as the burn outran the structure meant to hold it. The silver that had crossed the ship as one body lost coherence section by section, turning brittle under its own gain. Out beyond us, the dark sector answered, with movement. The distant contacts I had seen as weak returns shifted course in clean arcs toward the heading I had given the beacon, away from the lanes behind us, away from settled traffic, toward empty distance and the lie I had welded into the skin. That was enough. The Bedford's drive section ruptured 3 breaths later. The force threw me clear of the mast. My tether snapped to full draw. Armor plates went past in silence. The central spine cracked open and showed the ship's bright interior for one instant before the next failure took it all. I hung outside the ruin with one arm through the tether line and watched the vessel die. There should have been fear, maybe. Regret. What I felt was work finished and cost paid. That sat cleaner in me than anything else left. Brooks called once over comms. The damaged receivers turned her voice to fragments. My name made it through. I could not answer in anything that would have reached her. The Bedford came apart in stages. Bow first, then midship, then the long port flank where I had spent half my life patching other people's mistakes and a few of my own. Somewhere in the wash, my spare torch case drifted past me, scorched on one side. My initials still cut into the handle. That hit me harder than the blast had. The lifeboats burned hard away from the wreck. I saw one alter course by a few degrees, probably Claire or Brooks trying once more to line up a rescue path. They would have done it if there had been any chance worth the fuel. There was not. Contamination on the hull, suit damage, rubble field, failing frame, no safe return route. All the reasons I had locked the airlock from outside still held. The contacts in deep dark kept turning towards the false call. I watched until the light from the Bedford's last internal fires dimmed and the wreck spread thin against black. I thought of Tommy asking if I wanted the plate off whole, already knowing the answer. Of Jonah standing watch at doors he knew might close on his people. Of Claire kneeling in front of me with calibrators in both hands, because exactness was the only mercy she trusted. Of Brooks making the kind of choice a captain carries even after there is no ship left to command. Mostly I thought of the first patch, the easy one I should have walked away from sooner. I had believed damage could be fixed if I kept my torch on it long enough. The Bedford cured me of that in the end. A repairman earns his keep by knowing when repair turns into surrender. The tether line started to fray where hot rubble had bitten it during the blast. I saw the fibers peel apart one by one against the stars. I put my glove on it and did nothing. Out in the dark sector, the false signal went on ahead of the dead ship, carrying the hunters after it. When the line parted, I drifted free of the wreckage and let the Bedford fall behind me.